Happy New Year and welcome to the Metastatic Breast Cancer podcast for January 2023, where we will be continuing our journey through Thich Nhat Hanh's No Mud, No Lotus, The Art of Transforming Suffering. And first, I want to wish each and every one of you an abundant, peaceful, and easeful new year. It's always a delight to meet with you in our monthly mindfulness meetings. And recording this podcast for Hogue is a blessing that I never take for granted. So I hope that you find it useful. And we're continuing on our journey with the 6 mantras. And if you haven't tuned in before, the 6 mantras are ways to express love and compassion. They can be very effective in transforming suffering and producing happiness in a relationship with a loved one, a friend, or a colleague. Children can practice them too. You may start by first practicing the 6 mantras with yourself, because you can only love and understand another when you have practiced love and understanding for yourself. A mantra is a magic formula. Every time you pronounce a mantra, you can transform the situation right away. You don't have to wait. Learn it so you can recite it when the time is appropriate. What makes the mantra effective is your mindfulness and concentration. If you aren't mindful and concentrated when you recite the mantra, it won't work. We are all capable of being mindful and concentrated. So we've now arrived at the 6th and final mantra, which is, you are partly right. Thich Nhat Hanh teaches us that this mantra is to remind us that as human beings, we have both positive and negative traits. Our head shouldn't be turned by praise, nor should we despair when we're criticized. He goes on to say that the 6th mantra is perfect for dealing with the suffering that comes from the complexes, thinking we are equal to, worse than, or better than another person. When someone congratulates you or criticizes you, you can use the 6th mantra. Darling, you are partly right. This means that your criticism or praise is only partly right because I have both weaknesses and strengths in me. If you congratulate me, I shouldn't get lost and ignore the negative things in myself. When we see something beautiful in the other person, we tend to ignore the things that aren't so beautiful. As human beings, we have both positive and negative qualities. So when your beloved one congratulates you, telling you that you are the very image of perfection, you can say, darling, that is only partly true. You know that I have the other things in me too. You retain your humility. You're not a victim of self-delusion because you know that you're not perfect. When the other person criticizes you or says you have nothing to offer or that you're worthless, you can say the same thing. Darling, you are only partly right because I do have good things in me too. And very often it's much easier for us to accept praise than accept criticism. And with criticism, I like to actually have a mindful approach because if criticism is offered constructively and from a place of love, it can be an invitation for us to actually perhaps examine how we can change our behavior. However, criticism, if not done in a mindful way, can sometimes cause more harm. So when we're thinking about practicing mindfulness, it's acceptance of ourselves without, as Thich Nhat Hanh states, being caught in self-delusion. We all have good and we all have bad. And the more balanced that we can be, the more that we can see that in ourselves and offer ourselves love, compassion, and non-judgment, as well as see that in others. And then in turn, offer them compassion, love, and non-judgment. And I wanted to offer a practice to help us with the 6th mantra, you are partly right. So wherever you are now, just come to a place of stillness and just take a moment to connect with yourself Connect with your breath. And now I want you to take a deep inhalation. And as you breathe in, I want you to silently repeat to yourself, I liberate my mind. And as you breathe out, I want you to silently repeat to yourself, I liberate my mind. So let's do that 3 times together. As you inhale, I liberate my mind. As you exhale, I liberate my mind. As you inhale, I liberate my mind. As you exhale, I liberate my mind. And really allow yourself to feel as you inhale that you're breathing in love, compassion, and non-judgment. And as you exhale, that you are breathing out anything that is no longer serving you in physical body or mind. And with this exercise, we untie all the knots in the mind. Calmly, we observe the mind in all its subtlety to free ourselves from such obstacles as sadness and anxiety about the past and the future, and confusion and misperception in the present. Breathing in, I liberate my mind. Breathing out, I liberate my mind. Now release that. And Thich Nhat Hanh also teaches us about the art of happiness. The essence of our practice can be described as transforming suffering into happiness. It's not a complicated practice, but it requires us to cultivate mindfulness, concentration, and insight. It requires, first of all, that we come home to ourselves. And part of our problem and struggle in life is, and that we fill our lives with the constant to-do list and the endless distractions, is that we don't want to come home to ourselves. And once we enable ourselves to be present with ourselves, be present in our lives, we can make peace with our suffering, treating it tenderly and looking deeply at the roots of our pain. It requires that we let go of useless, unnecessary sufferings, releasing the second arrow and taking a closer look at our idea of happiness. Finally, it requires that we nourish happiness daily with acknowledgement, understanding, and compassion for ourselves and for those around us. We offer these practices to ourselves, to our loved ones, and to the larger community. This is the art of suffering and the art of happiness. With each breath, we ease suffering and generate joy. With each step, the flower of insight blooms. And as we enter a new year, it's always a wonderful time to engage in self-reflection, to engage in setting intentions for the year ahead. So I really invite you all to spend some time in the coming month focusing on crafting some mindful intentions for yourself for the coming year. And I want to remind you all of a previous intention that we discussed in one of our groups, which was, if not now, when? Each of you has been living with metastatic breast cancer. And I'm sure, as I've learned from you all over the past few years, how it has taken you and still takes you a long time to prioritize your own needs, your own self-care. And so I really invite you at the beginning of this year to prioritize yourself, your own mental health, your needs, your self-care practices. And remind yourself that if not now, when? Time does not stand still. We don't have unlimited time. So what can we do mindfully with the time that we have? What is it that you really want? Whatever that might be, I invite you to set that intention and to go for it. To believe that you can have more peace, more love, more bliss, more joy in your life in the coming year. And so I give you pause to think about that and to know that you deserve to prioritize your own needs. And we can nourish our happiness with mindfulness. We can get in touch with the wonderful elements of life in us and around us. We don't need to run around. We don't have to go looking into the future. The conditions are already there. With mindfulness, we can discover the fact that the conditions of happiness we already have are sufficient, really much more than sufficient. And happiness is possible right now in this very moment. When you walk, it can be a celebration. When you breathe with awareness, it's to celebrate. When we sit, we are celebrating. Every moment can be a celebration of life. Just as we may have many small sorrows that mindfulness can help us release, we also have a multitude of small moments of happiness that we can savor and extend. Whether you drink a cup of tea or take a walk or just sit down and look, you can create happiness during that time. People complain that they don't have any happiness in life. We need to find the many small joys that life has to offer and help them grow. There are many talented people with diplomas, degrees, and long titles. There are people who can invent revolutionary new machines and computer applications. We may like to ask them, can you create a moment of happiness? If you know how to do this, you can create something truly beneficial in your life. To make a soup, we need some water, some vegetables, some tofu, whatever else you like to put in there. You can make a good soup with just a few simple ingredients. Nothing fancy is needed. A small portion of happiness is a kind of soup. With a few ingredients, an open mind, and a little resourcefulness, we can make a moment of happiness for ourselves and for others. We can offer some of our tasty soup to someone else. If we know how to create a moment of happiness, we get to enjoy that happiness ourselves. And we can also double it by sharing it with another person. That is the art of happiness, tasting and delighting in the little happinesses of daily life. So I suggest as we end our podcast for this month that you take a piece of paper and write down all of the conditions for happiness available to you right now to aid you in really committing to intentional living in the coming year. When we recognize all of these elements, it's so easy to generate happiness. So I wish you all a blessed month ahead, and I look forward to seeing you in our virtual mindfulness group. Stay safe and well.